This one does the 3, 2, 1. No, it doesn't. Hello, good evening, and welcome to UK Book. I made myself laugh then because I was wondering whether it did a 3, 2, 1, and it didn't. So this evening, I am delighted to be joined by J.M. Hall, or Jonathan, as we'll be calling him this evening, because it sounds very formal. J.M. Hall. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, Jonathan. And you're here to talk about your series. And more importantly, your new book, A Clock Stopped Dead. Is that the right way up? Yes, it is.
Yeah, it is the right way up. Yeah.
And that came out, nice cover. I love the covers. We'll come on to those later. But okay. So do you want to start by chatting about, about the series and also about A Clock Stopped Dead?
Well, I'll start about the series really, because I'm sat here with the 3 books I've written. Somebody said, "Oh, you've written a series now. You've written 3 books. That's a series." And that was a bit of a moment, because I'll be honest with you, Karen. I never, ever, ever imagined I would write cozy crime thrillers or even thrillers. I've written all my adult life. And when I started to get successful, it was in the theatre. So I wrote plays. I was working at the National Theatre, at the Bush Theatre in London. And I thought that was it. I was going to be like a cutting edge fringe playwright, sort of moody black and white pictures of me, etc. And that didn't work out. But fortunately, I had a day job, which was in a primary school, which I would say saved my life, because I think when you're always trying to write, you're only in your head as good as your last success. But when you work in a primary school, your last success is like your last lesson, particularly when you work with 6-year-olds. They don't really care that you're a cutting edge fringe playwright. As long as you can run a tight Play-Doh table, you're God to them. So I was in this wonderful environment, which I talk about, later, because it is great for a crime writer. It's the best place to be. And I was very happy, really. Once I stopped being successful, once I was rejected by Casualty, Doctors, EastEnders, The Archers, I just carried on writing because I like writing, so I could write what I wanted. Again, never ever thought of writing crime fiction. And don't get me wrong, I love crime fiction. And I am an absolute acolyte of Agatha Christie. I think she's amazing. I think she's hugely underrated by so many people who televise her books and change the ending. I know. Would you get like Pride and Prejudice? Would you get Pride and Prejudice and have Elizabeth Bennet going off with Lady Catherine because that's more interesting? Anyway, sorry, I've gone into a rant. So, and then how life happens, and my darling mother died, and it became obvious that our dad was starting on that sad journey with dementia. Now, we had not such a bad journey with it as many people do. He just went into this sort of quiet, happy world where mother was in the next room, and off we all went. But then he was frauded. Somebody rang him up and told him he had to move all his money out of his account. And he did. The shocking thing, I mean, you're right. It was shocking. Our wonderful, capable dad, who used to do my tax returns with me, was suddenly a victim to this evil scam. But the really, really shocking thing was the bank, because he used to be a bank manager. And this bank where it happened was the one where he used to manage. And the bank were like the post office, they managed to hide behind the fact that they're a huge, big corporate organization. And it was like that. It was awful. It was awful. And that was the thing that really shocked and upset us. And I spent a year writing to the ombudsman, to the bank, to solicitors, to my MP, to Gloria Honeyford's Consumer Aware program, and got absolutely nowhere. And my sister said, you should write about this. And I really couldn't see this being a fringe play. I just couldn't. And I started writing it as a novel about 3 retired school teachers whose friend has been frauded out of money. And it really was just a way of me laying that ghost. I think if you're a writer, you learn what a wonderful way writing is to sort of address those areas in your life. And, you know, this was, but I never thought I'd even get it published. I thought I would vanity publish it and give it to my sister in this wine bar we used to go to on Christmas Eve. Anyway, I wrote this novel. I got on this writing course about getting your novel into shape. I pitched it to an agent, and suddenly off it was going around the publishing houses, and then it was taken on by HarperCollins. So it really was, I mean, it wasn't something I set out to do, but out of this awful, terrible thing that happened, you know, this really lovely thing happened.
I mean, that's amazing, isn't it? Because I mean, so often you never know why things happen, and you always, you know, some people look for a reason for things to happen, and I don't think you'd ever see this as a reason that it happened, but actually something really positive came out of it in the end. And Thelma, Pat, and Liz were born, as it were.
They're wonderful. Well, I say wonderful because they're a sort of a distillation of so many people I've worked with over the years.
That's really interesting. I was going to ask you that about whether they were based on real people. So so they are. Some of them are, and I guess
because you see, the other thing about in your primary school, you've got your primary school teacher who is usually a woman, who is usually running a home, and in those few words is encapsulated like a whole tornado. I mean, running a home, dealing with the home, dealing with running everything that needs to happen, often dealing with children, with exams, with relationship breakups, you know, all of that, which is a full-time job. And then you've got this maelstrom, which is a primary classroom with your powder paints and your tantrums and your baby brothers and sisters being brought in to be shown to the class, and things that go missing, and pumps that go missing, and parents getting angry, you know. And then, of course, you've got the government saying, right, well, of course, what you now need to do is to up the reading standards, and we're going to send an Ofsted in every few years just to make sure. So it really is a world. I think it is one of the most demanding jobs ever. And what always gets me is the way that these women, they take it in their stride. I mean, yes, they get worried, they get stressed, they get this, they get that.
Yeah.
But they do it, they manage it. And in amongst managing it, they also sorted me out with advice on mortgages, on moving house, on how to fix your gutter. I remember one of them stitching up my trousers when I bent down and they split. And then as you get older, you know, all the things that happen as you get older, it's all shared. And this is in danger of sounding a bit patronizing. It's really not meant to be. But, you know, in the village communities, you would have the wise women who would sort of sit around and say, what's what?
Yeah.
That's what Pat, Liz and Thelma were to me, a distillation of these wise women I've worked with. And also, you know, if you work in a primary school, you become an expert on working out when things that people have done things wrong. And all right, those people may be 6, and the crimes involved might involve pencil cases, you know, rather than bullying. But you know, you get to see, you think, oh, like that's a lie, that's not right, this isn't happening, and this isn't happening, and also the other thing about being in a primary school. It's you get a whole blizzard of stories every day, from the funny to the tragic to the sinister. you know, why has Mrs. So-and-so suddenly swapped her denim dress for leopard print leggings? What on earth has happened? Why has Mr. So-and-so's car got a big scratch down the side? So yeah, it was that world which just, you know, very life affirming.
And actually, like, thinking about it, because I worked in a primary school, not as a teacher, but as a TA for and as a playtime assistant for many years when my kids were little. And so much of what you've said is, you know, really resonated with me. And actually, the fact that, you know, those sort of women that I worked with, again, I mean, we did have one man at one point, but generally you are few and far between, aren't you?
I never have
but
to
actually,
for the toilet.
No. But also that, you know, they're normally really strong women, you know, really sort of, you know, they, like you said, they're used to juggling so many things that, you know, it's, yeah, they sort of, and actually crime fighters, I hadn't actually ever thought of them, but actually they do seem, they are a perfect combination of, you know, being able to do that. I've got some comments coming in. So Kaz has said, hello, because she interviewed you last time and she said that she got the pleasure last time and I have the pleasure this time. So
hello, Kaz.
So,
yes, I remember.
And she says your books are brilliant. And she's saying, will there be a fourth book in the series? Which I was going to say, we talked about briefly before we came on about how the sort of series came. Did you always know that it would be? I think I lost you there for a minute.
Sorry, I lost you a moment. Did you always know you would? What was
write a series? It would always be a series. You know, when you wrote that first book, did you always know it was going to be?
They said when I was talking to my agent, my now agent, he said, "Would you have an idea for a second book?" And I went, "Yeah." And he said, "What?" And I said, "Anonymous letters." So, and then when I'd written the second, I thought, I can't imagine writing a third off, because what I've realized with the series is I have two things I have to be able to write them. And one is a story that's really credible to me. All these three novels, at the heart of them is something that really happened, you know, heavily disguised. So there has to be something I can relate to, because I watch some, and don't get me wrong, I love watching crime drama, but some of it you watch it and you think, oh goodness me, you know, this is off the scale. I remember watching one and it all evolved around the fact a woman had had a heart transplant and her old heart had been somehow turned into a diamond, you know, and you think, this is great. So I have, and the second thing I'm also realizing is there has to be a Pat, Liz, and a Thelma story for each one as well. They each have to be getting their head around something. And that's sort of not been too much of a problem, because in a way, Pat, Liz, and Thelma are kind of who I aspire to be. They, you know, Pat is very flamboyant, which I like to be. Liz is very worried, which I definitely am. And Thelma is very wise, which I would certainly like to be. But so it is, when you talk about a series, you think, yes, I would love to carry on writing them.
Yeah.
But I think if you ask any author, they'd say, I just don't know. You can't take it for granted the ideas will come. No.
And I think you briefly touched on that about Thelma, Pat, and Liz, and what's going on in their life, and I really liked that as part of the story, is the fact that although they are solving the mystery, at the same time, you know, you've got their kids that are, you know, the Boomerang kids coming back for various reasons. We don't want to give too much away, but you know, husbands and it's Pat, isn't it, who's having the sort of midlife crisis about not wanting to go on the coach trip?
Yes.
I'm like, I wouldn't want to go on a coach trip
loudly. I've got someone in the next room who's looking online even as we speak. But then I thought, no, do you know what? She'd have a blooming good time on a coach trip. It's just, as you turn 60 and you think, oh, I don't think I could hitchhike to the Isle of Wight anymore.
No, I really like them. I thought they're really sort of, and I think obviously if you read, because I read the first book, but I didn't, as I said to you before, I hadn't read the second one, but I didn't have any problem picking the third one up again. And I don't think you would have any problem picking them up as a standalone, because you sort of give that background as well, don't you? You don't feel like you need to catch up. Well, I didn't.
I'm really glad you say that, because when you're in there telling the story, you don't always put yourself outside it to think, no. Oh, well, hang on, do they know what Key Stage 1 is? Or do they know the fact that these three ladies used to sit in the staff room together? But the editors are very, very good at picking all that up. So, and I'm really glad, because I like the idea people could pick them up as a standalone, because with the Miss Marples and the Hercule Poirots, I didn't read them in order at all.
No, I didn't.
And I loved them, and it didn't matter.
Actually, it was Sarah. Sorry, Sarah. It was Sarah that said that your books are brilliant.
Thank you, Sarah.
I can't always see I can't see people's names always. So sometimes I have to. Sometimes I can, and sometimes I can't. So, sorry, Sarah. But she loved all the three books.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
So you said about you sort of started writing because obviously of sort of the you sort of did theatre. How different is the novel writing to sort of playwriting? Because I think you sort of managed to put humour in and you put drama in. So I imagine all of those things are in plays, but obviously it's quite different writing a play than it is writing a novel.
Yeah, it's interesting you asked me that, because at the moment as well, I write a radio series for Radio 4. I know I've been standing at this bus stop 30 years and suddenly two come along at once.
It's always the way.
It's always the way. And there was one day when they rang me up, they don't say, would you like to write another series of it?
Yeah.
Which I always do. They just say, oh, you're writing another series. And it's the same day as I got a deadline for one of the novels. And you're like, right, okay, that's fine. That's all right. But
no problem.
No, it's okay. It's all right. Yeah. Turn off, call the midwife. I've got to go upstairs. But they are different. They're different disciplines. I was thinking about that. I think it must be the difference between doing a pencil drawing and an acrylic painting. Because a radio play, because it is all dialogue, it's a lot sort of leaner and smoother and quicker, because in the novel, you're writing what they can see, what they think, what they feel. You're switching points of view and what have you. Whereas in a play, it's just the dialogue. And with a 45-minute radio play, if I plan it out in advance, I can write a very rough scribbled draft in a day. Now that is a starting point. I then type it up. I then go through it. I then go through it. I then go through it. Whereas a novel is a much more measured process. I can write a chapter in a day and go through it and what have you. And then because with a play, you've got 50 pages, say, of double-spaced dialogue. A novel, of course, you've got over 300 pages of not double-spaced.
Yeah.
So it's like a marathon and a sprint, if I compare them. I can edit a play in a day because I can go through it in a day. A novel, it's trudging through, Yeah. So in a way, they're not incompatible, because it's two different. Writing two novels or two plays at the same time, I think, might be tricky.
Yeah, it's sort of like that. I know some authors who write sort of, I don't know whether you've had the same thing, but sometimes their editing or they're editing their next book as the next one comes out. So then you have like the publicity, but then you're still editing at the same time, and then the deadline. So that can be quite sort of difficult to balance.
Oh yeah. Well, I think when you're editing, you're dealing with what's already there.
Yeah.
And that's different. I mean, I'm not saying it's easier. I'm not saying it's straightforward, but it is different from creating from scratch. And your my fear is always when I come to an edit is suddenly finding something that doesn't work or a problem I don't know how to solve. So I always tend to put it off a bit. It's a bit like opening that bank statement.
Yeah.
Is there going to be something in there that I'm not going to really want to see? Yeah.
What is it they say? Eat the frog, isn't it? When that you have to eat
the frog.
You do.
I've not heard that.
Yeah. Yeah, apparently it's like where you do it's sort of like about in like doing work and things, is you always do the thing that you're not looking forward to the first, and then you sort of eat the frog and get it done, and then you do the other stuff afterwards, rather than like most of us do, which is not eat the frog and then worry about it all day and then have to do it at 4 o'clock.
Yeah, actually you're right, and it never kind of gets easier to eat the frog, because some days I do eat the frog and some days I leave it hopping around quite happily and don't even get near it. So yeah,
Put it out in the pond.
Yeah, the actual sorry, go on. Yeah.
So no, sorry, no, carry on. You carry on.
The actual creating, I think when you wake up in the morning, you know the thing that you really ought to do, and sometimes it's something you think you can, and sometimes it's something you think you can't. And maybe one of the things about learning your skill as a writer is learning how to go for those things that you really do need to do that day.
Yeah. So the idea, so obviously you said that the first book was based on sort of a real life event that happened to you, and so the second and third, because obviously the third, I haven't read the second, but the third is quite a different story, isn't it? So it's got a bit of supernatural elements, I would say, to it. There's quite a lot of things that are unexplained for quite a while. And I did love the sort of psychics. So that made me think very Agatha Christie, you know, those sort of psychics.
Thank you. You know, that's the biggest compliment you could give me, saying it made you think of Agatha Christie. Yeah,
it did. Yeah. So I mean, I love it. I love that sort of, you know, are they sort of it's that sort of like unreliable source, isn't it? You know, like are they sort of real? Are they taking it seriously? And in the book, as you find out when you read it, it's there's lots of things that come from that. So how did you come up with so do you want to give us a sort of brief outline of what happens? And without
I'll give you the hook, which and then I'll give you the hook, and then I'll sort of give you a little bit of where it came from without spoiling it. So the hook is Thirsk railway station, which is a very, very distinctive place. It's one of those stations. They say they've rationalized it. I think if they say they rationalized something, they mean they've spoilt it. And they ripped out the middle platforms back in the 70s, so the fast trains don't have to stop. So you've got these two isolated platforms and these huge trains belting up and down. And on a foggy day, and you get a lot of foggy days in the Vale of York, it really can be a pretty bleak place. So you've got this foggy railway platform. I love trains. I love Murder on the Orient Express, 450 from Paddington. I think if something starts with fog and railway trains, I'm in there.
You're in.
And of course, being 2024, there's a sign come up saying, we're sorry, but the train's cancelled. We do apologise, but you can all just, you know. And there's a woman on her own waiting for a train, and being of a certain age, she needs the loo. And she hasn't got a radar key, which is one of these things. Apparently, here's something, everyone, you can buy them off Amazon.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there you go. Anyway, so she goes out the station, and it's thick fog, and she sees some lights and she walks towards them, and it's a charity shop, and it's like, oh, I didn't know there was a charity shop there. And she thinks, oh, I wonder if they'll let me use the loo. And she goes inside, and it's really weird. It smells of tobacco smoke that only seem to be men's clothes and bric-a-brac. And it's very dim. And the lights dim even more. And she hears the door lock behind her. And a figure appears at the back and says, why did you do it? In rather sinister tones, at which point she screams, she flings herself out, the door's been unlocked, and she runs back to the station. But the next day, she wants to go back to check it out. And when she goes back, the charity shop has gone, vanished. There is no charity shop. There's not even the building. So that's the start of it. And then this lady who has seen it is a friend of Pat, Liz and Thelma, and she tells them about it, and that's how they go, and they'll have a look and they start getting involved. And there is a story about it of something that happened to a family. I'll just say there was a remarriage, that's all. And this was something was a true story I heard. And my sister, my wonderful sister, who is a crimepedia, because she loves Agatha Christie, but she likes going and buying all the old crime books, Carter Dixon, John Crispin, as well as Dorothy L. Sayers, Josephine Tate, that.
Yeah.
And I had seen on TV in the 70s one of these TV movies, and a woman sees a murder through a window, and she goes back the next day with the police, and there's nothing there. And I always liked this as a premise. So me and Judith, we talked about how you'd get something, and I thought, yeah, I'd like a vanishing charity shop or whatever. So we talked about that and worked out why would that happen. There had to be a reason, and it had to sort of make sense. So that is the premise. And I do like, in winter, they have times that they call thin times, when you feel that if there is another world beyond this one, the barriers maybe get a bit fuzzy and faded. Yeah. And I'd originally set the novel in the run up to Christmas, because I find that, to me, is quite a thin time. And originally you had Pat writing her Christmas cards, and you had more about the Busby's Christmas grotto, and you had Liz taking her grandson to one of these awful Christmas experiences, you know, with mangy reindeers and fighting elves. And but HarperCollins quite rightly said, we're going to struggle to sell a Christmas book that's published in March. So I then translated it to January, which actually I felt worked as well, because January can be a fairly bleak and long month.
Actually, I think that's I think I can see both reasons, both reasonings behind that. Obviously, if it had come out in October, that it might have been different, but I think December and January, Christmas makes it a little bit lighter, but December can be just as sort of bleak in some ways. But you need it for the fog, don't you, and the darkness.
Absolutely.
Not late, because it's not late when it happens, is it? It's not like in the middle of the night. It's
about 5 o'clock, and that's important, because it's sort of dark at 5 o'clock, and on a dark, foggy night, 5 o'clock can be like 2 in the morning or whatever. So so yes, that was where that one came from.
You spoke then about sort of how you sort of, you were talking to Judith, your sister, about how you is that how you sort of, how you plot? Do you sort of talk things over? Do you sort of are you a big plotter, or are you a
because you get asked this question, they say, are you a plotter or are you a pantser?
A pantser,
Because you go by the seat of your pants. Now, when I write, this is another difference with a radio play. I can plot it in advance, and I can say what happens here and here and here, and what's going to happen here and what's going to happen here. So I can do all of that in advance. But with a novel, I have realized the way it works is I plot it, But then every bit I write, I then need to replot and recalibrate and refocus, because you write. I'm trying to think of an example, but you write something in a chapter that comes out of nowhere, and then you think, oh right, okay, so that means everything I've planned I need to alter slightly to take that into account. But I always have to know before I start writing a chapter roughly what ground I'm covering, where I'm going, what I'm hitting, and what frogs I need to eat during that chapter. Because sometimes you have to get some things in that you really aren't sure about, and it would be easier not to write them. But you think,
yes,
in they go.
Yeah, well, I think is that sort of when you do that and things sort of pop up and it surprises you. Do you think that sort of adds sometimes to the book because it surprised you, that it will surprise the reader?
Oh, always, always, always. I've got a very good friend who's a painter, and we have great long conversations because I think the creative process is that there are similarities between painting and music and cookery and art and poetry. And I know when she's painting, she'll start with a little snippet, a color, a shape or something. And then as she expands, other shapes will appear. But then sometimes they go wrong and they need sanding back and removing. And sometimes there's something she really likes, but it's in the wrong painting, so that has to go. And it is like that. Always go with those ideas, because you can't ignore them. And you're right. I mean, my favorite bit, I think, of the first one, The Spoonful of Murder, is when one of the Liz is going to ask questions and she comes across someone auditioning to be a stripper. And that's probably my favorite part of the novel, but it wasn't in the first draft because I got some advice from my agent Stan saying, look, this maybe put that in. So always go, and it's never finished. Even when it's finished, it's never finished.
Do you read? I was going to say, when you finish it, do you read it once it comes out, or is it done to you then once it goes off and it's sort of?
I'm afraid to read it in case I see things.
You see something,
I see something. I'm afraid, but there are certain bits I will read. There are certain bits I particularly, and it's not an ego thing, but they sort of give me they re-engage me with who Pat, Liz and Thelma are, and they bring me back into that world, so
I am so I was going to actually, you just said about Pat. I was thinking if you sort of had if you made a TV series of it, do you have in mind who Pat, Liz and Thelma would be? Have you got any ideas of who if you've got a picture of them in your head?
Oh, well, yes, because they're real people, but they don't know that.
No.
And it's a funny thing because people say a lot, if it's made into a TV. I've seen so many books I've really like spoiled.
Yeah.
So there's part of me that thinks, would I like that? I remember Agatha Christie, the awful time she got seeing the Margaret Rutherford, Miss Margaret.
Oh God, yeah. Yeah.
I love Margaret Rutherford. I don't love what they've done with the Agatha Christie stories. So there's always that. And also with the Agatha Christie's, when they change them. I mean, there are the marvelous definitive ones like Joan Hickson and David Suchet. But I think, and I know someone who works in TV, and she tells me about all the changes and dynamics and politics that go on. And so all of that makes me have any thoughts like that and keep them to a daydream. But I always think if it was done, I would absolutely love Julie Hesmondhalgh to be one of them. I think she would like to be Pat, and I was thinking her as Liz, but do you know what, Pat? Because she brings to the audio readings. I mean, Julie could read a shopping list and make it compelling.
Yeah, she's great.
She is wonderful. And so just the thought that she would be there would be great. And then you see people like, I was watching Eve Best in The Crown, and I remember working with her 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Or people you love like Siobhan Finneran. And
yeah,
I think I've always been really, I've really liked series that have got women at the center of them. I love Dinner Ladies. I love The Golden Girls. I love Cagney and Lacey. I love Happy Valley. So yeah,
yeah.
But I suppose the thing I really think is, apart from Julie, kind of what I would like would be relatively unknown people.
Yeah, to sort of making their own sort of thing without having that sort of baggage. Yeah, no, that would be good.
Because Joan Hickson was, even though she worked for years, she was not a Geraldine McEwen or a Julia Mackenzie, but she absolutely, because I think we maybe didn't know her as well, we absolutely believe that she was Miss Marple.
Yeah, no, she's my husband for years told me not to bother watching the other two because there was only one Miss Marple in his mind.
No, it wasn't. Some of the Julie Mackenzies are good, but when they sort of put Noel Coward and Ian Fleming in them, or they put her into books that
she wasn't in. I know. That's
And yet they've got those amazing short stories, The 13 Problems, which I love. You know, and they could easily have taken those and done them in. But anyway.
Yeah. Anyway. So when you're sort of writing and you've got your plot, so you're obviously sort of thinking about, you know, where it's going and as it develops. And how do you sort of work in that sort of giving the reader the chance to guess who it is? Because actually in this one, I was like, well, I don't know. Because you've got the supernatural thread is that you don't know where it's going, which I think is really clever and I liked because it steers you in a different direction because you're almost looking at that without and the other bits going on under, you know, sort of. So was that sort of your plan with that?
It's really hard because you know right from the word go who's done it. And the challenge is not to make it so screamingly obvious. And I think what you tend to do is to write the villain really well and detailed and just sort of skate over everybody else and see what has to go in. I do love, I'm going back to Agatha Christie again.
Fine, I love Agatha Christie, so there's no problem. Sorry if anybody else doesn't.
It's not just that her plots are clever, but I love the way she reveals them. And there'll be something, and then she'll say in italics, you know, but the clock had stopped, and you think, oh yes, you know. And so I like dropping these things in plain sight and wondering if people will see them or not, and then bringing them up at the end. When you reread an Agatha Christie, of course, you see, I've now reread all of them about 4 or 5 times, but you can see all the clues, all the bits, you know, she always plays fair. So I think the thing is to always play fair.
Yeah.
You always have an explanation that everyone goes, oh, right, I didn't see that, rather than what?
Yeah, no, you don't want a what, do you? I mean, you can have a what as in, well, I didn't see that coming, but a what, I didn't see that coming because I don't know who they are.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because they appeared in chapter 3 or something, and they were crossing the road or something. You have to have that. Like I said, like giving the reader a chance, isn't it? You don't want it to be so obvious that they guess in the first 2 chapters. But yeah, you want to be able to think afterwards. Oh yeah, I can see that now.
Exactly, and you want it to be satisfying, believable.
Yeah.
You don't want to think, what, you know. So yeah. But it is hard to get right. I put my hands up and say,
So I really enjoyed the friendship between the women, and I also like the humor that you put in. There was a few times where I was sort of lied on the sofa reading and I laughed out loud But so, and because it's some parts of it are quite dark, you know, not very dark, but is darkness in the book, isn't there? You know, there's things that have happened, and then you have that sort of bit where you just laugh, and so I thought that was really clever. I liked that. And do you think that's from like playwriting and theatre? Do you think that sort of comes naturally to you?
I think it's a primary school staff room. I mean, you must remember the laugh.
Oh yeah, I do.
And you must remember when something, you know, horrendous has got, where there's been some sort of explosive stomach upset of some description, you end up laughing, you know, because I think it's a way of,
because otherwise you cry.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that is the one thing I always remember about every primary staff room I've ever been in is the laughing. And how funny the teachers were. And that is just something I loved and just comes out in my writing. It's something that I like doing in the radio scripts as well.
Yeah.
Because they're about a secondary school. So, yeah, I think it's just me. And actually, now you say it, it does go back to my family. I mean, my grandpa, I can remember us all being around the tea table and everyone just in, you know, absolute tucks of laughter because of things he used to say. He used to have this wealth of sayings. One of them I've used in the next book. He used to say, "Nice chap, but nobody likes him." So I think it's a family thing as well. And my wonderful rebellious Auntie Catherine, who went to art. I think she was the first person from Hornsey to go to art college in the 1950s. And she could just describe a situation with absolute clarity and precision and humor. Yeah.
I think interesting thing about from being in the staff room when I first went in was seeing the different sides as a parent of going in and seeing the class teacher every day and then seeing the other side of them, you know, the very very serious, I've got to talk to you about your children sort of face, and then it's like it's like having two sides, isn't it?
It is sort of, yes. And I think one side helps you deal with the other side, you know. So definitely.
So we talked. What sort of research do you do for the books? Do you have to do much research, or does it basically come from what you already know, or have you had to sort of look into things?
Yeah, the first one, it was nearly everything I knew. The second one, there's a lot in it about academies and academization.
Right.
Which, I freely admit, and apologies to listeners who think differently, but I don't agree with it. I feel like it's a privatization of education. I don't get me wrong. There's some, you know, amazing academies that work very well and do very, very well by the children. But I suppose at the heart of it, I feel education is something should be provided by the community. So that was the second one. There was a certain amount of research, but as the radio series is about an academy trust, the things overlapped. I think with the third one, I needed to do a bit of driving around the area. Me and my sister sort of got in the car and went around the area a bit because I needed to find this, you know, to sort of see the different locations.
Yeah.
I think if I write a fifth, because I'm contracted for 4, so I'm working on the 4th now. But if I write the 5th, I'm thinking, yes, actually, there are certain things there I do need to research and find out about, just so I know what I'm writing about, just so I can write it properly. I think with anything you write, everyone says write what you know, but I always say, well, then how would C.J. Sansom have written the wonderful Shard Lake books, or I would say G. Wells have written The Time Machine. So
you need a time machine, didn't you?
Exactly. So I think there's a truth in that sentence, but I don't think it's all encompassing. So I do think, there are things and very handily, I've got a policeman. That came out wrong. There's a man in the where I go and have coffee on the Sunday morning after church, and he used to be like a chief constable. So at last I've got somebody I can talk to about, police procedure.
Yeah.
Even though you'll have noticed the police don't particularly figure in the books.
No.
There are bits where I just need to check that, because as soon as you get into a certain territory, a whole raft of things immediately click into place. And I sort of prefer to avoid all of that. So that's something I need to research. Yeah.
And that really works, I think. I think it's, there are police procedural books that, you have that detail in, but actually you don't need them in, I mean, I guess you might want them for a steer or, they're in the background, but it doesn't feel like they're missing at all in your books.
That's really good to hear, because I love police procedure books. N.Z. Craven, Patricia Cornwall, Liz Mystery and Leslie McAvoy, who both live and work in Bradford. Leona Deakin. I love those books, but I instinctively know it's not for me to write them.
Yeah.
And so I have got this police woman who keeps turning up, and they say, well, this has happened. She says, well, it's nothing we would get involved in. just to deal with that one, But it does mean you have to have crimes that aren't necessarily, that aren't going to involve the police. So that does narrow down what can happen. Right.
Well, I guess it's that sort of mysterious sort of, mystery, isn't it? Which is what we like. We like a mystery. Exactly. And although there are deaths in this book, we can say, I think, without giving any spoilers. We can, that they are, like you say, they're not going to be that you've got to get, a pathologist out or, come and,
Because I always find that dynamic where you've got the people investigating and the police saying, back off, this is us.
Yeah.
Or come and get involved, we need your help. I always I would find that quite an awkward path to walk. I wouldn't quite know how to navigate my way through it.
No.
So yeah.
So one thing we said at the beginning, which I said how much I love the covers. Are you pleased with them, and how did they sort of come about?
I've no idea how they came about. They appeared like three shining angels in my life. So the first cover appeared, and I think it's branding by HarperCollins. And I have to say they have really done it amazingly.
Yeah.
I love the covers.
Yeah, I do. I think they're so striking. They sort of really stand out.
And I have to say to everyone watching, I got no input into them. This is not my, so I
you didn't draw them on the side.
The one thing I will say about the covers is the first one appeared and it has this cat on the front. And I thought, oh, that's wonderful, except there isn't a cat in the novel.
No.
So in the second novel, I thought, well, do you know what? I'm going to put a cat in. And we'd been watching this program about some poisoning that had been happening, and there was this cat wandering around, and we called the cat Snaffles. That was our joke. Then we had Snaffles the cat. So here we have Snaffles on a teacup, Snaffles on a paint on an ink pot, and we have Snaffles looking at a clock. So they put the cat in, and like a good slave to whatever. I put the cat in the novel.
You wrote him in.
I wrote him in. Yeah.
Yeah. Going back to your sort of, you touched on the villain. So we're not going to say who the villain is, obviously, but was he quite like? Actually, I shouldn't say he. They she fun to write.
They had to be believable to write.
Yeah.
I had to be able to think they actually did this.
Yeah.
They And you know what? Yeah, they were fun to write because there was, yeah. In fact, all the villains, because I do like to think I would never actually do any of these things myself, but I sort of have to understand people who would. But then you working in a primary school, that helps, you know, because you see people, all right, what they've done is steal a pencil case or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah. So yes, they were fun to write. Good to write. Those bits were always like, right, good. Okay, we're back to them.
And you said as well, you knew at the beginning who did it at the beginning, because some people don't. Some people have no idea until they get to the end. But you knew when you started.
Yeah, because I always have to think what's been done to who.
Yeah.
And so out of that comes who did it. But then I do know, well, actually, it was Angela Lansbury on Murder, She Wrote. She always says she didn't, Miss Jessica Fletcher always said she didn't know at the beginning who would have done it. And I'm trying to think if that would actually be the case. But no, I always have to come up with what's happened, what's at the heart of it.
Yeah.
And as part of that, I have to have two who's, who it's been done to and who's done it, why they've done it. And that's like the the beating heart of the story, I think.
So I'm going to ask you a question now, because but you probably won't want to answer it. It's like, do you have a favorite of the three? Is that like, you know, that's like, who's your favorite child?
Yeah, who's my favorite? I don't know. I feel very fond of all of them. Oh, I think the question would be, would I like to be one of them? If I can translate it.
Yeah.
I'd like to be Pat for two reasons. One is she's married to a builder. So if there's any problem in the house, it's going to be
yeah.
And, you know, as our garden fence has blown down for like the 15th time, I think, yeah. And also she's got this just amazing kitchen with flag floors and an Aga and, you know, and all of that. So I think I think I identify most with Pat. But
yeah, I liked Pat. I mean, I like them all, but I liked Pat. Yeah. I thought she was, so she had something about her that I just really liked. I liked about her. Before, just looking at the time, and we're coming up to the hour. So I sort of, one of my questions was, which is, you sort of have answered, but I'll ask you anyway, is who's your favorite author? So I don't know if it is Agatha Christie, but I'm sort of getting that, but it could be somebody else as well.
Well, in terms of authors, it's funny, you might have a few. I love Agatha Christie. I love Barbara Pym.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Great.
So observationally. I love Tove Jansson, adult and children books.
Yeah.
A lot of children's authors I read as a child, I love as well. But if I had to choose one, I think it would be Agatha, because of her huge influence on me. Yeah. And I actually think she is a writer, and people will go, oh, she's the queen of crime. I actually find her more akin to Chekhov and Mrs. Gaskell and even Charles Dickens.
Yeah.
That tradition. Yeah, there are crimes in her stories, but they are stories with crimes in, not stories about crimes.
Well, she was amazing, this sort of social commentary, wasn't she, of that period, and sort of, but also she didn't just write crime either.
You know, the Mary Westmacott books. There's one that was about an election in the 50s and about the Socialist Party.
Yeah.
Whatever. And and when you read the later books, there's Miss Marple, and the village has sort of got a housing estate, and, you know, and the shops have gone, and there's a supermarket that you go around in. And then you go right back to the 20s, and there's people calling and leaving their cards, and, you know, train travel across the continents and what have you. So, I'm going to say Agatha, but with a big shout out to Barbara and Tove.
Yeah, well, that's good choice. I mean, three good choices there, I think. But I mean, obviously, I'm a big Agatha fan, so I'm happy if you just pick one. But the other two, I love Barbara Pym as well. I only really discovered her sort of probably about 2 or 3 years ago. She had sort of a bit of a renaissance, I think.
Well, she was somebody. She wrote in the 50s, and then they suddenly said, you know, your books are interesting. We don't want them. And she had this whole wilderness time, which, you know, in a way that was me between like 2006 and 2009, 2020, 21, 2019. And yet she carried on writing. She was a writer.
Yeah.
She wasn't saying, do you know what, I'm going to stop this. She carried on writing, and that was her, who she was, a writer. So it was a great, you know, role model there.
Yeah, no, amazing. I think so. Book 4, is that one finished being edited?
It's not finished. Draft 1 has gone off. I'm in that same, you know, like when you've done your exams and you're waiting for the results.
Oh God, yeah.
Draft 1. Yeah, I'm in this sort of fool's paradise, because I know at some point, you know, well, actually, I hope though, because I think the most unsettling thing would be if it came back and we said, oh, well, that's fine.
Yeah.
Because I know it's not. I know it needs that editing process. So book 4 will be published next year. I'm crossing everything, but the first draft is done. All I can say is, one thing I will say is it's set in a hot summer. It's a hot summer. So we've got the wet spring, we've got the gusty autumn, we've got the foggy winter, and now we've got the hot summer. So I'm seeing maybe an orange cover, a yellow cover.
Yeah, yellow or orange. Yeah, no, they'll tone in nicely with that.
That's
Oh, I mean, I hope you do carry on with them. I do really hope, because I think there's a lot of life in the ladies, isn't there? And I think there's a lot of stories in that you could.
I'm now negotiating this time in my life. I turned 60 last year, and every time I say that, I just go, what? And I retired in the autumn. All right, retired from teaching. I do 1 day a week, which is sort of sanity to me. I love it.
Yeah.
But I retired. And so I am negotiating this time of my life, you know, when sort of hits could go and things could and so these ladies are sort of guiding me through those times, the good and the bad and whatever. So I feel like I'm on a journey with them. Yeah.
That's amazing. I love that. I really do love that. I think, I'm completely in awe of how you sort of wrote them and taught at the same time. I think that's amazing, because how did you have even time?
Well, okay. When I wrote this one, full-time deputy.
Yeah.
Poor old dad was ill, and so that was taking up a lot of energy. I always got up at 5:10 in the morning. My lift would come about 7:20. So I'd have my meditation time, and then I'd have my writing time. Sometimes it felt like I was moving a pile of sand with a teaspoon. But every day when I was writing it, I was in a safe place. I was in my world. And all the things that were happening with poor old dad, and all the things that were happening at school and what have you, for 10, 20, 30, 40 minutes, that was my time. And I think you've got that rhythm going in your life. And in fact, when I was writing them, I would then drop down to 3 days a week during the pandemic, which was so tough for so many people in so many different ways. It did enable me to invest in the writing in a way I'd never done before. But actually, when you've got little time, you really use it better. And I've got like full day.
You're like, oh, well, I don't have to. I suppose it's like that, thing. Well, I don't have to rush because I've got all this time.
There's a lot of YouTube getting watched, I have to say. I've got to get a bit of a routine going. So, yeah.
Oh, well, thank you so much for joining us, Jonathan. It's been an absolute pleasure to chat to you. I've loved it. I'll hold up. You can see all your books there, but I've got my little copy of A Clock Stopped Dead. I absolutely loved it.
Thank you.
I'm gonna pick up number 2 because I need to go back now and have a little bit more before book 4 comes out next year. So thank you so much. Thank you to everybody for watching this evening, and join us again soon.
Thank you for asking me.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Right.